welcome to my first podcast, Robert Stogner's I Have Forest production, The Crossroads of the Rock and Roll Highway. Part 2 is Paul McCartney dead. Also, the third part is Jim Morrison's death, the mysteries around it. So let's begin with the Crossroads of the Rock and Roll Highway. The legend says if you stand on the crossroads in the dark and a moonlit night, the devil himself will come and offer a deal for your soul. The deal is a lifetime of easy money, women, fame. Some takers were Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, just to name a few. You stand at the crossroads just a little before 12 a.m. You have your guitar and be playing a piece there by yourself. The devil will walk up and take your guitar and tune it, and then he'll play a piece and hand it back to you. That's the way I learned to play anything I want, Brian Jones said of the Stone. In the folk magic of many cultures, the crossroad is a location where two realms touch, thus represent a place between worlds, or neither nor there. As such, the crossroads is a site where supernatural spirits can be contacted and paranormal events can take place. Some say that once you're offered the deal by the devil, you will live a life of luxury and fame and fortune. But it all ends, well, you die, I guess, and ends your adventure. I don't know, is it all worth it? You decide. The second part of my podcast is Paul McCartney dead. Paul is dead, an urban legend and conspiracy theory alleging that Paul McCartney of the English rock band The Beatles died in 1966 and was secretly replaced by a lookalike. An exclusive interview recently with Ringo Starr, the drummer of the Beatles, said, as a matter of fact, Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike, William Campbell. On November 9th, 1966, Paul McCartney had an argument during a Beatles recording session and had angrily driven off in his car with his girlfriend Jane Asher, born April 5th, 1946, an English film and television actress, and crashed his car. Paul died as a result. To spare the public from grief, the Beatles replaced him with William Campbell, the winner of a Paul McCartney lookalike. They dug up hundreds of supposed clues to Paul McCartney's death have been reported by fans and followers of the legend. These include messages perceived when listening to a song played backwards and symbolic interpretations of both lyrics and album cover imagery. One oft-cited example is the suggestion that the words "I buried Paul" are spoken by Paul McCartney's bandmate John Lennon in the final selection of the song "Strawberry Fields Forever." Lennon later explained that the words were actually cranberry sauce. Another interpretation of the Abbey Road album cover symbolizing a funeral procession where John Lennon dressed in white symbolizes a heavenly figure. Ringo Starr dressed in black symbolizes the Undertaker, and George Harrison in denim symbolizes the gravedigger. And Paul McCartney is barefoot and out of step with the others, symbolizing the corpse. Fact. The American Bandstand program had a contest shortly after the alleged accident in 1966 looking for a lookalike who could sing just like Paul. No prize was ever announced for the winner. Fact. On 25th of December 1967, Paul McCartney and Asher announced their engagement, and she accompanied McCartney to India in February and March of 1968. Asher broke off the engagement in early 1968 after coming back from Bristol to find Paul in bed with another woman. They attempted to mend the relationship but finally broke it off in 1968. Jane Asher has consistently refused public discussions as part of her life. She also sued the Beatles for several $million and won. In fact, the Beatles went to Tibet to visit the Dalai Lama to change the new Paul into the old Paul again through a ceremony like a baptismal in water. They never told Paul where they were going when they took the trip. Third part of my podcast is the Doors conspiracy surrounding Jim Morrison's death. Shortly after the Doors made the song Riders on the Storm, this was the last song Jim Morrison recorded. He went to France and died a few weeks later. The single was released in June 1971, shortly before Morrison's death. The song can be seen as an autobiographical account of Morrison's life. He considered himself a rider on the storm. The Killer on the Road is a reference to the screenplay he wrote called The Hitchhiker, an American Tale, where Morrison was going to play as part of the hitchhiker who goes on a murder spree. The lyrics, "Girl, you gotta love your man," can be seen as a desperate plea to his longtime girlfriend, Pamela. As it says, Jim Morrison's Life, Death, Legend by Stephen Davis in 1962, while Jim was attending Florida State University in Tallahassee, he was seeing a girl named Mary Barlow who lived in Clearwater, 280 miles away. Jim would oftentimes hitchhike to see her. Those solitary journeys on a hot and dusty Florida 2-lane blacktop roads, with his thumb out and his imagination on fire with lust and poetry, nizzled in the God knows what else, taking chances on the redneck truckers, fugitive homos, and predatory cruisers, left an indelible psychic scar on Jimmy, whose notebooks began to obsessively feature scrawls and drawings of a lone hitchhiker, an ancestral traveler, faces and dangerous, a drifting stranger with violent fantasy, mysterious tramp, the killer on the road. The official statement made by the authorities was the Doors frontman Jim Morrison died from heart failure, even though his heart was deemed healthy just prior to his death. However, many fans do not believe that's what really happened. This disbelief of the official story stems from the fact that an autopsy was not performed due to the fact that the examiner did not suspect foul play. Also, in the days following Jim Morrison's death, there was a media blackout concerning the event. Immediately after his death, during the media blackout, people began theorizing what they thought really happened to Jim Morrison. What happened the night of Jim Morrison's death? The details of what actually happened on July 3rd, 1971, the night Morrison's death, are not exactly clear. What is known is that Pamela Morrison, Jim Morrison's longtime girlfriend, found him dead in a bathtub of their Parson apartment. It seems that French medical examiners found no evidence of foul play and ruled Morrison's death a result of natural causes. According to Morrison's obituary, Morrison had seen a doctor in Paris last Saturday about a respiratory problem and complained of this problem on the day of his death. The official stance was the 27-year-old Morrison died of heart failure. This determination was made without the medical examiner performing an autopsy. Jim Morrison conspiracy theory. Morrison's age, the lack of an autopsy, and the fact he passing was not announced until 4 days after his death sparked fury of alternate theories about what really happened to the Doors frontman. One theory is that Morrison did not die in July 3rd, 1971. Instead, some fans believe he faked his death. The theory was perpetrated by a 2009 interview conducted by ClassicFans.com with Gerald Pitts. Pitts claimed Jim, when he pulled off, he took drugs to make himself look dead. He was in a coma and woke up 6 weeks later. Pitts further claimed that Morrison was living on a ranch, raising horses, and working as an actor with Pitts and his agent. However, that is not the only theory what happened to Jim Morrison. Another theory is that Morrison did not die of natural causes, but rather supernatural causes. Believers of this theory contended that Morrison was murdered by Patricia Kennelly through the use of witchcraft. Kennelly was the short-term wife of Jim Morrison as well as a witch coven high priestess. The two were married in a Celtic church hand fasting ceremony where they were both cut and drank each other's blood. It was a non-traditional ceremony, and Kennelly's pagan beliefs that sparked the rumor that she used some sort of witchcraft to kill Morrison. The movie is often theorized that Kennelly killed Morrison because of his relationship with Morrison. Kennelly contends that Morrison is the actual Morrison murderer. An alternative theory about Morrison's death was outlined in 2007, The End of Jim Morrison. The French book, written by Sam Bennett, states that Morrison actually died in the bathtub stall of Rock and Roll Circus nightclub. Bennett claims that Morrison died in a stall of heroin overdose when his body was discovered. His corpse was transported back to the apartment and placed in the bathtub. I'll leave it up to you to decide. Riders on the storm, to this house we're born, into this world we're thrown. Anyways, you decide how he died.